With this effect, what I wanted to achieve was, as you can see, I wanted to have a metal cube, and I wanted a laser to come on and strike the cube and etch away the CG Academy logo type out of the surface of the metal cube. What I also wanted was sparks, which you can see, and I wanted melted metal to sort of dribble down the outside of the cube. Now, if you look at this effect, you'll see that as the metal goes down, you can see it's actually hot when it first gets spat off by the laser, and you can see that as it runs down the front of the cube, it cools and becomes sort of dark grey, and pretty much, you know, in the same way that metal would do in that sort of circumstance, it would oxidize quite quickly due to the heat. So you can see it's quite an interesting effect. You can take elements of this effect and use it in a number of different environments. So let's quickly have a look at what we've actually used to produce this effect. First thing we have a look at is the actual physical sort of assets that we have in the scene here. If I go into perspective mode and have a look around, I've decided to use an environment sphere, which you can actually see around this entire scene here, and it's literally just a geosphere which I've actually just flipped the normals on, and you can see here I've actually frozen it to stop accidentally selecting it and so on. If you go to the material editor, you'll see that this is actually the material I've placed on it. It's this RNL probe, which is actually a HDRI map that I converted into TIFF format, so it actually works with mental ray, which is pretty much what this effect has been rendered in. If we zoom in here, you can see that we have these two spheres. They're actually using an overbright material, which actually isn't in the material editor here, but that's actually just to give very bright highlights on the metal as it cools and so on. So these are basically just sort of fake highlights. They reflect in the ray trace material, and they give you very bright sort of highlights that you can see in there. Then we've actually got the, if I actually go to here and turn on all of these, I'll just show you the geometry. Then we've actually got the cube itself, which you can see is just a chamfered cube that I've frozen here. And what I actually did was I detached the front face of it, which is this object, which you can see is called displaced cube face. And I've modeled these three objects here. Well, I say modeled, I mean they're just geospheres, which I've positioned in the corner of the cube, and they're there just to make the cube look a little bit more interesting. It's just as simple as that. They don't have any real function beyond that. Now this cube, you can see has got a subdivide modifier placed on it, and that basically is there to help with the subdivision of the surface, so that when we actually do displacement on the cube, it works to a sort of higher quality. Now, when you actually saw the render, I mean, if you actually look at it, you'll see that you actually have displacement. When the laser cuts a gouge in the surface, it actually is cutting a cut down into the surface. And that's actually achieved with the textures that we have here. I've got the particles turned off at the moment, so we can just very easily just scrub through the timeline, and you can see what's going on here. The main part of that laser cutting effect is I've got this animated gradient ramp, which you can see here, and as you can see I've called it the melt mask, and it's just basically used to control where the displacement is taking place, and it's also used to put into effect a self-illumination effect on the metal cube as well, and that gives it that hot look when the lasers actually cut away the surface. So if I actually scrub along here, you'll see that over time this is actually animating, and these gradient ramp positions, they're actually just hand animated by myself, and I think the keys that you can actually see here in the timeline are actually the keys that belong to this gradient ramp, because this material is, you know, partly applied to this front surface here, and so because of that the keys are actually shown in the timeline. You can see it's pretty irregular, so it actually follows the speed at which the laser cuts the letters. I didn't just use a straightforward wipe across, because the laser doesn't actually cut in a linear manner. It actually follows the form of the words CG Academy, so it doesn't actually go across, you know, in a very linear manner. It stops and starts and goes back on itself and so on. So you can see that moves across, and that basically causes the displacement as it goes across. It's used in a mask in a material which actually provides that displacement. You can see we've got this material here, and you've got displaced with mask, and you see I've got a material set up